Welcome to Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers, a once-a-week show covering all things Buffalo Sabres and NHL hockey. We thank you for joining us today, and to make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes, be sure to subscribe to and like the show on YouTube and catch the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Sabres Scoop, THW, and everything else at The Hockey Writer. And make sure you head over to morningskate.io to sign up for our daily Morning Skate newsletter, so you don't miss out on the latest and weirdest hockey news every day. We got some Sabres news to announce today. Lots of stuff happening. I'm sure you saw, Brandon, whether it was the EICHEL'S stuff. But first, we got to get into this. According to Lance Lizowiski and the Buffalo News, Owen Power is officially returning to play for the University of Michigan next season. This allows him to live the college life that he wanted to live last year, but obviously couldn't because we had this little thing called a global pandemic. So that kind of altered it a little. I also believe this is the best for his development personally, because let's just face it. Is it really worth it for him to play with the Sabres next season when they're clearly looking to tank for Shane Wright? This is not a team destined to win it all. And honestly, looking at the developmental paths of, say, a Quinn Hughes or Cale Makar, who also took 1 and 2 years respectively to play in the NCAA, I mean, look how good they've turned out. And I get that he kind of has the onus of being a first overall pick. And this is the first time this has happened since Erik Johnson, that he won't be debuting in the NHL immediately after. But I think it's okay to break that trend because it's best for his development, in my opinion. I'm curious to get your take there, Brandon.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, let's just say that it's not a bad thing that he's not playing in the NHL this season. It doesn't mean he wasn't a good pick, doesn't mean he's not a good player. It's just exactly what you said. The Sabres are in an extremely fragile situation right now. They've got to be really careful. I think we both agree with all of their top end prospects. They've got to be careful not to rush them in too soon, especially when they're not going to be competitive. They've got to be careful not to, develop them improperly. And I think he's going to get the best attention at Michigan. I think he's going to be playing obviously alongside great players like Matthew Beniers, another, the second overall pick. I think he's going to be very, very good there, and it'll be good for him.
It's going to be so exciting to watch that Michigan team next season, just because they got Kent Johnson, the 5th overall pick in Columbus, Matt Beniers, as you said, even Luke Hughes will be on that D core with him. It's just going to be ridiculous. Like, it's going to be must watch hockey. And I saw even a tweet today. I wonder if that team could challenge the Buffalo Sabres next year in a game if they were to face off.
Yeah.
I wonder if it would be close.
I know it's just a joke, but you got to think if it would be a close game.
I mean, once EICHEL'S traded, you have to imagine maybe it's closer than you think. But one last note here. Do we think he suits up for a couple of games at the end of the season, in that short little window there where the NCAA season ends and the NHL regular season usually has 10 games left? He would burn the first year of his ELC if he were to sign it with the team and then play at least one game. Do we think Owen Power plays any games for the Sabres at all next year to end off the season?
I really wouldn't be surprised, especially because they haven't shied away from testing out some of their prospects towards the end of the season when they're not doing well. But it is interesting because do they want to burn a year of his ELC? I'm not sure. He might be 2 years away from the NHL. So in this case, I don't think it would be the worst thing if he got, a handful of games with the Sabres at the end of the season, just to test where he's at in his, development trajectory and see how ready he is. So I could see that. I really could, along with other players who might not make the roster immediately out of the gate, such as Jack Quinn. But then even with him, I don't know. But for Power, I could see that for sure. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Because even like we're talking about the post-trade deadline Sabres. So we're expecting them to sell off the assets that they even have on the roster at this moment. Who knows if Will Bircher's even a remaining member of the team at that point, if maybe he can rebound slightly during the season. Maybe they'd like to sell him off. There's going to be spots open. And I think, honestly, to give him a taste of NHL action wouldn't be the worst thing for him. It obviously just depends how far Michigan goes and how it ends up working out, if it's the most plausible scenario. But if he does burn that year of his ELC, you can obviously debate whether that's worth it or not. I mean, it would likely make his next contract cheaper, because then you're talking about maybe 2 years of NHL action. And, he's probably going to have to adjust that first year. He might not actually command that much on a long-term contract, as opposed to if you burn it maybe the next year and he has a monster year in that third year. Very curious to see what the Sabres go for here.
Exactly. Yeah. And let's just hope they get it right. Because, we've talked about how they've botched sort of development of other players. And I really hope that doesn't happen with a lot of the guys, especially Power. But if he were to get into the NHL next season for a handful of games, I wouldn't hate it. It would be cool to see. But like you said, it's all going to depend on what the Sabres do as far as selling off some of those assets, that those real players that they have right now. And let's circle back to it because I know our fans want to hear more about this, as do I. Jack Eichel. There's more to go on with the Jack Eichel rumor mills. He took to Twitter today himself, his only his second tweet of his brand new Twitter account, to voice his frustrations. And that's sort of what people thought it was, because the frustrations were one single emoji. It was a disgruntled emoji, sort of the eyes rolling to the side with the sort of, upside down smirk is the best way I could describe it. So that's all he tweeted. It's closing in on over 20,000 likes, and it appears the entire hockey community is just waiting for something to happen. A lot of our Hockey Writers colleagues were commenting on this, having a lot of fun with it. Is this the best strategy for Jack Eichel and his camp, his agents, to be doing, as obviously they're looking to pressure Kevyn Adams?
Well, Brandon, we had saw that statement that had gone out that John Vogel tweeted out. Clearly they wanted something to be done. And, they didn't want to have to wait till training camp. So I wouldn't even be surprised if Eichel's agents, both of them kind of said, hey, maybe it wouldn't be that bad if you actually tweeted this out, because these things usually just don't happen. I don't imagine Eichel just did this on his own. Maybe he did, we'll never know. I did laugh when I saw that, because that's something that happens in like the NBA, I don't think you usually don't see stuff like that happen in the NHL, like stuff like this being made public. But this is such a drama show that we're watching. This is a soap opera that's going on with Jack Eichel and the Buffalo Sabres. So they're looking to pressure Kevyn Adams, but honestly, I don't think the management group in Buffalo is going to budge. I think they're going to wait, and ultimately a deal is going to get done by the early September, if I have to imagine.
I think so too. And I gotta say, say what you will about Kevyn Adams and whether you agree with him waiting so long to trade Eichel or not, but I think it says a lot about his composure and his patience as a general manager, really just to sort of stick to his guns and wait, even with things like this. A lot of general managers, especially ex-Sabres GMs, would have buckled under this kind of pressure and made a deal maybe they weren't happy with, read Ryan O'Reilly. But I really do think that Kevyn Adams waiting here, it shows a lot about his character, and I think that he's doing the right thing. But you mentioned this being sort of like a soap opera. So here's a question for you. Are Sabres fans, or should Sabres fans turn on Jack Eichel? Most understand his desire to leave, but there's a growing animosity, I feel like, between him and the soon-to-be former fan base. He was never really the, all-star fan favorite here. He always sort of had those character questions, but because he was such a good player, fans still loved him. But now there's an animosity. Are Sabres fans going to turn on him?
Honestly, man, if he gets traded and everything goes kind of the way it continues to go on this current trajectory, he might see some boos next season when they go back to play at KeyBank. Because honestly, I don't know, man. I think it's a rough situation here with Eichel and the fan base. I mean, most have already turned on him. I understand where he's coming from. He currently has not been able to have the surgery he wants. And in terms of just looking at the past 6 years, looking at all the changeover around him, it's hard for him to truly believe, in everything. Even if the team does look better, we were saying that, years ago. So in his mind, he doesn't really probably believe it's going to get better, even though we kind of can't see that there is a different, there's different signs of improvement for the team. So for Eichel, he's just looking to leave. And, he's been looking to leave now for months. He hasn't been able to play in forever. He only played in those 20 games last year. And now it looks like he's not even going to get to play to start the season because, and that statement made by the agent, he tried to make it clear that he could still play had the surgery happen, but that was over a month ago. Now we're talking about that, right? Like if he has that surgery, he's not playing game 1 of the season. By all accounts, I would project he probably isn't, right? So I don't know. I personally, have no hard feelings against Jack Eichel. I can understand though why Sabres fans might be a little bit upset, but I think it's just kind of like the heat in the moment type of thing. I hope they can kind of truly kind of get the, try to understand Jack's perspective more maybe as time passes on. Hopefully, if a trade eventually happens, which you have to hope it does.
Yeah, that's the one thing. But yeah, I totally agree with you. I think you put that pretty well.
Definitely, and as the Sabres look to rebuild here, Sam Ventura promoted this on Twitter, some job offers that the Sabres are currently looking for. And specifically, the team is looking to hire a data engineer and a data scientist to join their hockey research group, continuing to add to their analytics department. So, Brandon, I got to pose this question for you. Do we believe the Sabres are heading in the right direction here? Just last season, just a few months ago, we were talking about, oh, there's no scouting staff. They're not even covering various leagues. It's only video analytics. I don't even think there's much analytics even being used by the by the front office. It seems like everything's a mess here, especially after that Taylor Hall trade. Everything does seem, post draft, since June, since Ventura came, honestly, it seems like everything's turned, a different direction. What do you think there, Brandon?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I especially like what he said about this. He said, if you're a rising college senior and this is, one of your specialties that you're studying and you're going to graduate with a degree where you could do something like this for a career, then I encourage you to apply still, because we could wait a year. We're not looking to hire immediately. We're looking to hire the right people who can help us for the long run. I really like that part of this post on Twitter, actually. And I think it's the right move. Totally. This helps them go in the right direction. We've talked about this. You just mentioned how like their scouting staff was so bare bones, basically a skeleton staff, with no focus on analytics. And that's going to change, and it's got to change in today's NHL. And hopefully, it helps them down the right path. I mean, they're making those hires. Sam Ventura is looking like a fantastic hire on the part of Adam. So I'm really happy about that. And we got to hope it works out in the end, but it's never a bad idea to add more people to your scouting and analytics department to help you today with drafting, development, everything.
Oh yeah, definitely. Even the hiring of Jason Nightingale, it looked like it influenced their picks potentially. Even in this past draft, I know it was pretty close when he was hired compared to when the draft happened, but it seemed like he might have influenced it just slightly, because I like the direction the Sabres went in this past draft. Opposed to 2020, they picked a lot of more skilled, undersized players. A lot. That's what they really valued, is skill. And hockey IQ, which is usually the best, and they believe they can work on the raw intangibles there. And as we're about to get into, they're hoping that they can really develop these guys, because the past decade they haven't been able to develop anybody. Even their first round picks barely can get developed and turn into NHL players. That has to change. That's why we're going through another rebuild. This can't happen again. The process has to change.
Yeah, I mean, another decade, no, it cannot happen again. So Kevin Adams and company are really trying to make sure that they get this right, and they're doing some things that are giving hope, and I hope it's not false hope. And like you said, you preface, speaking of adding new team staff, they actually did this week. The Sabres announced on Twitter earlier this week that they hired Sabres alumni Tim Kennedy and Nathan Paesch as development coaches. So two familiar faces, ex-Sabre players coming in to help with development. So this was obviously Buffalo's director of player development, Adam Mayer. He had a hand in this. He's worked in player development all around Buffalo. He's done his rounds with the Sabres, the Amherst in Rochester, and NCAA with Canisius College in Buffalo. And so he added Kennedy and Paesch to what is already a stacked development team. It includes Dan Girardi, Mike Ansell, and Seamus Kodak. Mayer said that he's focused on building out the player development department because the mission is, and I quote, to just provide constant support to our prospects, to build that trusting and strong relationship so that our prospects can become the best people and the best players that they are capable of being, working tirelessly to help them become future Buffalo Sabres. So here's a question for you. What do we think of these hires? And what do you think of that mission? It's really a mission statement. And I was honestly pretty impressed. What do you think about it?
I really like that statement made by Mayer there, because, it's quite clear these guys are going to be working tirelessly, as he said, to really help these guys develop. And, looking at a player like Alex Nylander, even Casey Mittelstadt, those guys did not develop the way you would necessarily hope for relative to their draft position. Even as Zemgus Girgensson, even he was a 13th overall pick back in the day. So when you have a guy like Jack Quinn, who's currently playing with the Rochester Americans, and you add friendly faces like a Dan Girardi, who was just a recent former pro, and you're adding guys who lived in Buffalo, know the area, and Tim Kennedy and Nathan Paesch, that's huge for them. And I mean, it's always, I mean, people will complain about former players getting all of these hockey positions and hockey operations, but in terms of player development, I don't think you can do much wrong than hiring a former player, especially somebody that knows the Sabres organization and has played in it before, preparing these new Sabres of the future, and Jack Quinn and players like Owen Power as well when they eventually get to the team. So I think this means a lot. I think this is good. Like you said, it's never a bad thing to hire more people. That's what the Sabres have needed to do now for the past few months, and they're doing so. So, in my eyes, I like this new mission that they're heading towards, and I think it's gonna. I have a hard time believing that this won't provide more success in the future for the team.
Definitely, gotta hope so. And with that being said, let's reset the show here. You're watching Sabres Scoop presented by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to and like the show on YouTube and catch all the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com and on our Twitter feed at Sabres Scoop THW. So we had a lot of Sabre stuff to talk about. Surprised we still do at this point, honestly. But let's transition sort of into some general NHL news as we usually do. And there was some breaking news today. This is big stuff. I don't think enough people are talking about this. Breaking news out of the desert as the city of Glendale, Arizona informed the Arizona Coyotes that it will opt out of its joint lease agreement for Gila River Arena after the upcoming 21-22 season, meaning the Coyotes must find a new arena to play in. Got a lot of questions to unpack here because this is really cool. We'll eventually have somebody on either from THW or outside to talk Coyotes because I feel like there's been so much news about this team that's just sort of gone under the radar because they sold all their players basically. Now they've got the arena stuff. They've had ownership issues ongoing. But here's a question. What does this specifically mean for the future of the organization? Are they going to move down the road into Phoenix, maybe share an arena with the NBA's Phoenix Suns? Are they going to relocate to another city in the US or Canada? What's going to go on here?
Well, Brandon, the Coyotes owner did make a statement about this, and he's trying to kind of preface that this isn't as big as an issue as it might seem. He's putting all of the disappointment towards the city of Glendale, in terms of breaking this lease agreement. Mm-hmm. So we don't really know what the short-term solution is. I also encourage you guys to read Patrick Brown's article for the Hockey Writers that kind of describes this. And I also would recommend reading Katie Strang of the Athletics article. She's the one who kind of broke this news because you'll be able to find a lot more description there. But in terms of what this means for the future of the organization, who knows? This is a team that wants to eventually, find a long-term arena. They can't even find an owner that will stay there for multiple years. And remember, there's a time where Gary Bettman actually had to help this team very much at the beginning of their franchise because there's always been that relocation rumor with this franchise. And, we know that the league eventually probably wants to have a team in Houston, and they just had an expansion draft. And the rumor is, they're probably, if the next expansion draft is probably going to end up being 4 teams added into the league, kind of equal it out or something like that might happen. So I don't know if we're just going to have like a 1 team added. So that means it's way down the line. So if another team's being added, it's going to be through relocation. And the Arizona Coyotes are the front runners to be relocated at this moment. Everybody used to put Florida there, but look how good Florida is looking now. Yeah. I don't think they're not being relocated anytime soon, hopefully ever. But with Arizona, sadly, that day looks like it could come relatively soon, maybe in this next decade. And, they might have to share an arena with the Phoenix Suns now by the looks of it. That's one of the rumors out there. There's so many options. I saw one arena that they could potentially be playing that is like NHL, up to NHL standards, but in terms of the seating, like it only holds 5,000. So it actually isn't. So in that regard, it isn't. So there's a lot of options here. I'm curious to get your take on that, Brandon.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've talked about how I really like these Sunbelt teams to succeed. I like to see Florida be good. I like to see Arizona be good. But with the Coyotes, they just haven't been able to get it together. And it sort of looked like as they started to ice a better team in the 2 seasons ago, it looked like they were headed in the right direction. All of a sudden it feels like the sky came crashing down, and it's really sad to see. But like the ownership said, they've survived these sort of arena problems before. They've been able to figure it out. They've moved, they've extended the lease somehow. And we've seen other teams recently. Look at the New York Islanders. They just survived a crazy lease agreement that they had to break, the 25-year agreement with Barclays, and they built their almost done new arena that they're going to play in hopefully for the next 25 years. Maybe the Coyotes can do the same thing. I don't know. The city of Phoenix is one of the biggest cities. I think fifth biggest metropolitan area in the United States. So they have the population, and obviously they should have the fanship to support an NHL franchise. It just hasn't worked out for whatever reason. So I really hope it does. I don't know though, but like you said, if it does come to relocation, I think it's going to be somewhere in the U.S. I think it's going to be Houston. I've heard Portland. I don't know, but yeah, there's a lot of questions to be asked. So let's just tie it up, I guess, with this. What do we think of the state of this Coyotes franchise at the moment? You can talk about on ice product, off ice, all together.
Well, I'll combine the off ice and the on ice because honestly, there's always something weird revolving around this organization. Like John Chaika seemed to be, doing a great job there. He was touted as an analytics GM, and similar to kind of Kyle Dubas, people believed, he didn't really have a direct analytics background. He was just kind of labeled that. And in terms of his work there, I mean, from 2016, 2017, they're making good picks. I mean, looking back at them trading up to select Jacob Chikrin, I believe that's what they did in that draft of Detroit. That looks genius. Clayton Keller looked like a good pick, although he hasn't really been developed that well. I mean, he's kind of had a weird progress. But then now you're looking fast forward, Doug Armstrong's been brought in, and he's established a goal here that they want to get Shane right? And in terms of they acquired every bad contract in the league this past off season. I don't even think that's a stretch. They almost acquired every bad contract, literally. From Vancouver, they acquired Anton Strawman's deal from Florida. So they're going to have some of these guys actually play for them. They're not all going to be LTIR contracts. And the big thing is they all expire after next season. So they're going to have cap space to work with. They might have a top 3 pick and maybe a Shane Wright, hopefully. Maybe it's somebody else, but this is a loaded draft class. So there's you can at least tout it as the future looks bright there. But now you're going to have, I believe, I don't even know who their starting goalie is going to be. Carter Hutton.
Yeah, maybe.
They barely have any players in their team anymore. So it's going to be a while for them. And I don't know. I look at what happened with Connor Garland. I'm sure you saw that quote after he was moved to Vancouver in that Oliver Ekman-Larsson deal. They didn't even talk to him after the season. There was no communications. And this is a guy that wanted to be a part of the future there. And again, he might have been just slightly above that age group. But when you're actively treating players like that in your organization, that doesn't bode well for you. So I'm curious to see how that works off ice. Like I said before, they need to find stable ownership. I don't know if that's ever going to be something that's easy for them. Hopefully it is. I mean, their current owners are billionaires, so you'd have to think it would work. But as we've seen with some NHL owners, it sometimes doesn't. But these problems it's always the same problems with this organization. And at some point, it's just not going to work anymore. But, in my eyes, it would be cool if Quebec City could get a team again. I'll just point that out there. I don't know if that's I know the NHL might not want that, but if Quebec City over this next decade could get a team, maybe from Arizona, that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are definitely hoping for that. A lot of Canadians for sure. You hit the nail on the head. It's definitely ownership is the biggest problem there. And then it's drafting and developing. If you want to fix the on ice product, you can't just bring in guys like Taylor Hall and Phil Kessel and hope that it makes you good for the long run, because it's not going to. But we'll see. I mean, yeah, they're in that phase again where they're taking all these contracts, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. And, I'm sure getting Austin Matthews in a few years and as a UFA maybe would help. But for the time being, that's not happening because the NHL 22 teaser trailer was released today, and Austin Matthews was voted as the cover athlete for the second time in 3 seasons. This never happens. There used to be a cover vote, and as EA always does, they take away a feature that was good and they just, get rid of it. So there's no longer a cover vote. So they're just picking the cover athletes internally. So I'm just curious, what do you think of him being named the cover athlete again already? Very controversial topic on Twitter, of course, because it seemed like Artemi Panarin was going to be the cover athlete. There were rumors maybe David Pastrnak was going to be as well. Ends up ultimately being Matthews.
Yeah, I wonder why they went with Matthews. Not to say he doesn't deserve it. He had a fantastic season last year, but like you said, there's so many other players who haven't had the distinction of being named a cover athlete for NHL games quite yet, and who are just, as exciting. Like you said, the two you mentioned, Panarin and Pastrnak, would have been perfect players. There's a lot. I mean, pick a Florida Panther, pick Barkov or something, pick a player from a team who maybe not mainstream NHL fans know, so that when they see it, they'll get interested and it'll be, I don't know, but like you've had your McDavid, you've had your Matthews, you've had the Taves and Kane, you've had Subban, you've had all these big name players. They haven't had a goalie since Marty Brodeur in 14, and I would have liked to see a goalie. There's tons of great goalies out there to choose from. I'm not mad that it's Matthews. It's just second time in 3 seasons. Like you couldn't find anyone else, but it's not. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. Certainly.
I'd love to research that because clearly they must have sold a lot of copies of NHL 20, and they believe he's clearly the most marketable player. That's why they're doing this, right? For purely revenue reasons. Matthews is best friends with Justin Bieber by all accounts. So, he's kind of becoming one of the more recognizable faces in the game. But yeah, I was surprised myself. Like that didn't even occur in my mind that he was even going to be, considered for that. And when I saw that today, I was just shocked. And this kind of sets up the next question here about this. Who would you have voted to be the cover athlete? If you just had to pick any player. I know you said a goalie, but would you ultimately pick a skater?
I don't know. I do really like goalies, but if I were to pick a goalie, it would be Fleury, obviously. But it's a little weird because I would think you'd put him in a Golden Knights jersey, but then he's on a new team, so maybe logistically that's not the best idea. If it were to be a skater, it would have to be someone from Tampa for me. Maybe it would be Nikita Kucherov. Maybe it would be Steven Stamkos. One of those players. Definitely a Tampa Bay Lightning player.
Interesting. Honestly, I would have gone with David Pastrnak. There's a great photo of him from the outdoor game that I think would have worked perfectly. I saw some fan-made covers of it. I think it would have been perfect, and he's honestly a guy that's becoming more marketable. He's a part of that perfection line, as they always call it in Boston. I would have honestly went there, and I know I'm a Leafs fan saying that the Boston Bruins should be on the cover, so I'm sure I'm going to get roasted for that. But I would have liked it. But honestly, I can't blame them for picking Matthews because why not? He's just won the Morris for sure. It makes sense. I mean, if anything, it probably poses the question why he was named covered 2 years ago. But I don't know. He's clearly a marketable face, and they believe he's going to sell copies at this game, so that's why they're doing it.
Yeah, totally. And let's stay on a fun note here. Let's play a fun game to end the show. We're going to project the remaining contracts for superstar restricted free agents, RFAs that need to be signed still. There's quite the list here. When I looked over the names, I was honestly surprised that a lot of these players are still unsigned. Starting with Elias Pettersson out in Vancouver with the Canucks. What term in AAV are we looking comfortable, to give him? Vancouver currently has just a hair over 10.6 million in cap space, and there are some LTIR space used in contracts like Michael Furlan that'll give them more. What do we think for Pettersson?
Yeah, that's going to be so fascinating, man, because I don't know. I mean, from Canucks, everything I've seen, they're going to have about, I believe, somewhere between 14 to 15 million, basically, in cap space to get these guys signed. They just signed Jason Dickinson to a 3-year contract with a 2.5 million AAV and somewhere in that ballpark. So in terms of Pettersson, like everything I'm seeing, it seems like he's going to get bridged. So I have to imagine this is going to end up being a 2 or 3 year contract, which, it's going to set him up for a monster deal down the line. He's coming off a down year. So you would think if he was coming off a down year, by the way, that they would be actively looking to sign him long term because you could probably get him at a cheaper cap hit. I get if his camp is maybe wanting a short term deal because they probably should be. But if I was the Canucks, I wouldn't be going out spending $2.5 million on Tucker Pullman, for 4 years. No. I'd be looking to lock up Elias Pettersson, your top line superstar. But that's just me. I'm not Jim Benning. So in my eyes, I'm projecting 7 million over 2 years. Maybe if they're lucky, it's 3 years. Maybe that raise it to 7.5 million AAV for me. What do you think, Brandon?
I think 2 years is a safe bridge. I think 3 is just an awkward number for some reason. I don't know, because at that point, why not 4 or 5? But I think 2. I'm going to go with the low ball of what you said. Let's say 2 years. Let's say 6 million, because they've got to be a little bit careful with their money. And I agree with you that he's going to have a big payday. I just don't know what that's going to look like. He could make over 10 million if he really, really shows out for the next few seasons and plays really well, puts up big numbers. We'll have to see, but I'm going to say 2 years, 6 mil.
Yeah, and I mean, look at Matthew Tkachuk. He signed that 2-year, $7 million contract bridge as well, I believe, a couple of years ago. So that's interesting as well. I mean, there's a lot of fascinating scenarios here with Vancouver because we're going to stay with them. What do we think the term in AAV is going to end up being for Quinn Hughes? because and they have to sign this guy too.
Mhm.
Like they clearly, this is not the best plan that I think for them, but at least these are the major contracts they have to mainly resign. And Oli Levy, I know it's another guy they could have to resign, I believe, as well.
Yeah. Ola Levy is definitely going to get lower than Quinn Hughes, let me tell you. But Quinn Hughes, I wouldn't be surprised if they gave him something pretty equal to, if not slightly higher than Pettersson. I think Quinn Hughes is so valuable for the Canucks. And I think you could either bridge him for similar money to Pettersson, or if you want to lock him up long term, I could still see him being between, honestly, 7 to 8 million on a 4 to 5 year deal. They just don't have the money to play with. Like you said, they were kind of irresponsible with some of these, shorter term but still pretty significant money contracts like Tucker Poolman. So I don't know. I hope they can make it work with the money. But Quinn Hughes, I'm gonna say he's gonna get a little bit longer term and a little bit more money than Pettersson. I know that's not very specific, but that's all I've got right now.
And Brandon, in terms of I just want to clarify, it was actually Matt Barzal who signed last offseason, 3 years at a $7 million cap hit. That's what I could believe Pettersson could take. NBC actually has him projecting under 5 million on a 2-year bridge. I just don't see that. That'd be shocking to me if he took that, because he's not going to help out the Canucks like that. He's worth more, especially at Barzal, who, they're quite comparable in that sense, could make that. For Hughes, I don't know. I think they're going to try to sign him long term. I think one of these guys is going to end up getting signed long term, as long as it doesn't dwindle into preseason, because at that point, you're going to look to just get him signed. And in terms of a bridge, I mean, he's also coming off kind of a down season for his standards, especially defensively. I know point production wise, he was relatively the same, but there's a lot of options there. I'm going to try to go long term here. I'm going to try to get a cap hit. I'm going to say it's going to be 5 years. So just over that kind of middling mark, it's going to be right there. And I'm going to say it's going to come in at roughly $8 million.
I could see that's very realistic. Very realistic for a guy like Quinn Hughes. Let's go over to Minnesota, the state of hockey. The Minnesota Wild, they have a guy unsigned still, Kirill Kaprizov, who we've talked about a little bit. We've sort of, talked about what kind of contract he could get. Term AAV for Kaprizov. What are you doing?
See, we know he's rejected the 7-8 year contracts in the $9 million ballpark, right? So he's actively rejecting. He wants like more money, and that's just not going to happen. And I mean, I think it's more so the term that's the issue. I don't even know if it's necessarily the money. It's not necessarily that out there. So let's say we know it's not going to be 7 or 8 years. It's going to have to be 4 or 5. And at that price, I mentioned it the last show, I believe, even Sebastian Aho's 8.5 makes sense in my eyes. It could even be slightly. I wonder if they're going to have to pay him 9.5 for 5 years. Like, I think it's going to be a crazy contract. He probably wants Mitch Marner money,
Yeah.
But in my eyes, I don't even think Kaprizov's as good as Mitch Marner, at least yet, from what he's shown. He's only played 1 season. So I could see 9. I'm going to honestly go high here. I'm going to say 9.5 over 5 years is my projected guess for Kaprizov to stay with the Wild.
Yeah. Hey, that's a pretty good guess. And for some reason, I got a weird feeling about this situation. So I'm going to go real off the board. I'm going to say 1 year, 8 million, just like Taylor Hall signed in Buffalo. And the reason being because Kaprizov, if he's held out this long for the kind of numbers, like contract numbers that Minnesota offered him, I'm not convinced that like he wants to sign that sort of really long-term deal for the big money. Maybe he wants to do a sort of prove it deal. So I'm going to say 1 year, 8 million, just to go off the board.
Yeah, definitely a 1 year contract. That'd be quite fascinating, because we know they're going to make that 1 year run. And if they can acquire Eichel there, they're going all in clearly, but you would have to think they want to go longer than that. I would be shocked if it was only 1 year, but we'll have to see. We're talking about a long-term extension, though, potentially in the works here, because Andrei Svechnikov, it just came out. He's rumored to being close to signing an 8-year contract in Carolina, and that would be at an $8.75 million AAV. This is according to sports.ru. It's a website. And do we think he ends up getting this contract, or is a bridge contract more likely? Do we think? Because what do we think about that? He'd become the highest paid Hurricane at that price, making more than Aho. And I'm just curious to kind of get your thoughts on that. Do you think Carolina spends that money on one of their star players?
I think they've got to. We've been I've been personally hard on the Hurricanes for sort of, cheaping out on contracts like Alex Nedeljkovic, like not willing to spend that just a little bit more money to keep around your talented players. I think that deal to me, 8 years, 8.75, that's reasonable for a player like Andrei Svechnikov. He's one of your best players. You've got to keep him around. You're going to have to pay Aho, a lot of money too long term. And you want to keep guys around. And I think you've got to reward Svechnikov with a contract like that. He's going to continue to be a good player for the Canes. I think that's a very realistic deal, to be honest. So I'm going to stick with that.
Definitely. And this one, I'm surprised we haven't really broken this down too much yet, but we're going to get into it. And this is Rasmus Dahlin, because honestly, the Sabres offseason has made us forget he still needs a new contract to be signed. And in terms of guys, I mean, Cale Makar serves as a benchmark. I think Quinn Hughes is going to be very essential in terms of what Dahlin ends up making. I'm just on NBCsports.com right now, breaking down some of Dahlin's statistics. As a rookie in 2018-19, he averaged 21.09 time on ice. And in terms of 2019-20, it actually dipped to 19-18. And then his career high was set last year in terms of his time on ice at 21.36. So the Sabres haven't really trusted Dahlin like the Canucks deploy Hughes, or maybe like the Stars lean on Miro Heiskanen. He was also signed to that long-term contract as well. So it kind of make you think he's probably going to come in at a lower cap hit. Evolving Hockey's predictions fall somewhere in the idea of 6 years, 6 million. That would be a steal if they really got him at that. I don't know if I'll necessarily agree to that. John Vogel of The Athletic gave some ideas. A 2 or 3 year deal to Dahlin might command something in the $6.5 million range. So that's clearly way off from Evolving Hockey's predictor right there. 8-year deal falls $8 to $8.25 million range. I'm curious, Brandon, what do you think the Sabres superstar that they're looking to build around gets as an RFA this offseason?
This is one player that I wouldn't be surprised the Sabres signed to an 8-year deal. Really, I think Dahlin is the only player I'd feel comfortable saying that I could see the Sabres signing to the longest term deal possible. And if it was, I wouldn't be, surprised if he got just shy of 10 million. I would feel comfortable paying Dahlin 9 to 9.5. That's Jeff Skinner money. You can't just go throwing that around. But 9 to 9.5 for Dahlin, I truly believe this player is going to bounce back in a big way next season. He looked so much more comfortable being deployed under Don Granato's system of coaching. It looked like he got his offensive spark back from his rookie season. He looked like confident. He looked like he could drive a play. And I think he's going to be worth 9 to 9.5. And over 8 years, I think, as the cap continues to go up, that's going to be a pretty team friendly deal if you think about it in the long run. You've seen people like Seth Jones get that money, and I think Dahlin is certainly, he should be trusted to carry the same hit.
Yeah, it's going to be quite fascinating. I know you brought up Seth Jones, and you could bring up that UFA versus RFA debate. But I mean, obviously the clear comparables here are Miro Heiskanen and Cale Makar. I'm also curious, who do you think signing first out of Hughes or Dahlin to kind of set that final benchmark? Because like these guys are going to have to be signed here soon, unless they're going to go into training camp. Like I hope the Sabres don't go into training camp having Dahlin unsigned.
I'm going to say Hughes just because the Sabres are dragging their feet, so to speak, on a lot of other things. And I think a lot of other things have to happen, like trading Jack Eichel, for the Sabres to feel comfortable giving Dahlin a big contract if that's what they're going for. So I think the Sabres have a long task list to go before they sign Dahlin. That's why I think Hughes will get it done before.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of other noteworthy RFAs out there. I'm just going to throw out a few names, maybe. So I mean, there's a few guys like Anthony Beauvillier and the New York Islanders is going to be fascinating because they haven't even signed anybody. Casey Mittelstadt as well still needs a contract. Jesperi Kotkaniemi is an interesting guy on Montreal. Do we think any of these guys are going to make a lot of money, or do we think let's start off with Mittelstadt here. We'll just quickly touch upon it. What do we think Mittelstadt gets with the Sabres?
Mittelstadt might get a 2-year deal, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was under 5 million. I think maybe 3. I think I wrote an article detailing.
Did you say 5 million AAV?
I said under 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I said definitely under 5. Yeah, no, I'm honestly wouldn't be surprised if it was like 2 years, 3 million per. And I don't think necessarily that would be an overpayment just because he showed a lot of improvement. I would feel safe giving him something like that. What about you?
See, I think you could even go lower. I think 2 years, $2 million in my eyes,
Yeah.
because I think just because it was only one season, maybe at that point he might only want a 1 year contract, but we'd have to
Maybe.
see there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interesting guys. Like, I'm curious what Nolan Patrick gets with the Vegas Golden Knights, because he's a player looking to bounce back completely. And if they don't acquire Eichel, like, he's probably going to be their top six in their top six forward lines. And they're taking a huge chance there. Cody Glass did not work there. So they're just hoping that they can get Patrick to work there, the former second overall pick at the 2017 NHL draft. All these guys should probably command roughly the same range. Like Kailer Yamamoto and Edmonton is probably going to want somewhere in the $3 to $4 million range. I expect most of these guys to get that as well. And that's basically going to be it for the offseason as we head into the next season. So it's going to be quite interesting to see what these RFAs sign for.
It totally is. Yeah, we're getting into that period of the summer where news slows down, but we're going to see some signings, and we'll definitely have some stuff to talk about for sure. Yeah. And with that being said, I think it's time to wrap up the show. So we thank you for joining us. This has been Sabres Scoop presented by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube and follow us on Twitter at Sabres Scoop THW. And once again, make sure you head over to morningskate.io to sign up for our daily Morning Skate newsletter so you don't miss the latest and weirdest hockey news every day. Don't miss out on all the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com. For Jordan, this is Brandon, and this has been Sabres Scoop. Until next time.